I'm gonna love you.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Dan's Chess Lounge. Today I'm going to be going over one of my favorite Magnus Carlsen games. This game was played in Biel back in 2012, and it was against Viktor Bologan. He's a really good GM. He's an expert in the King's Indian defense. I have one of his books on that. But this game here was great, and one thing about this game here is that it covered an opening that I was not that great in playing against, which is the Benko Gambit. I've struggled playing against the Benko because it's kind of awkward. Black has a lot of queenside pressure going on, and Magnus Carlsen in this game here, he produced some of the finest queenside magic, and it just blew my mind when I saw this game. And it has always been one of my favorite Magnus Carlsen games. So let's go ahead and dive right in. Viktor Bologan was black, Carlsen was white. D4, knight f6. And we're just going through. I'm not going to explain the nitty-gritty behind every single move here. This is the typical Benko Gambit opening theory so far and setup. It's the accepted version. All right, we have bishop a6 here, e4, bishop takes bishop, king takes bishop. And even just right here, let me just stop right here and say, even right here, just playing this over the board, you know, learning this opening, it can be kind of awkward for white. You don't castle the normal way. You have to manually castle. I mean, and then these are kind of moves that you just don't find, you know, on your own. Really, you have to either be taught these moves or look at a lecture, something like that. So I've kind of struggled with the Benko for a while, but Magnus Carlsen played this game so brilliantly, and he gave me a lot of great ideas. And you'll get to see these ideas and employ them in your own game going forward. D6, knight f3, bishop g7. Typical Benko play so far. Nothing is out of the norm so far. White manually castles. Knight b d7. Now right here is where Magnus starts to put his own spin on things. He plays queen e2 right here. The normal move, or the standard, I guess, book move is rook e1, followed by rook e2. And with the whole idea of is moving your rook over to protect the b2 pawn so you can release your bishop and also try to free up your rook that's on the a1 square. That's the overall goal. You would like to have both the rooks on the second rank, your bishop to g5, your queen on d2. That's sort of like a typical setup that white would go for here. But Magnus didn't do that. Magnus played queen e2, which is really nice because it protects the b2 square, the b2 square, and it also protects the e pawn here. So that's a really interesting move. Queen b6. Now, this is the start where Magnus starts to create this setup that I will never forget. You know, he plays a4 first, rook b8, then he plays knight b5. Now this is amazing because this completely stops all of black's counterplay. You know, the whole point of the Benko Gambit is that black gives up this pawn on the queen side so that he can have free range of the A and B files for his rooks and queen, and he can just put a lot of pressure on white, position on the queen side here. But with Magnus playing a4 followed by knight b5, it just completely shuts down the queen side. Black plays knight e8. Magnus is able to get out his bishop. So he freed his bishop up. Plays rook a3. Knight b6 hits the a pawn. And then Magnus just completely solidifies the queen side with b3. Now Black's Benko bishop on g7 is useless. It's not putting any pressure on the position right there. I mean, this is an incredible setup here. Queen d7. Rook a2. So now, what I find interesting about this point here, Black plays f6. He's striking out on the king side now with f5. First he plays f6, hits the bishop, puts the question to the bishop, and then he plays f5. He's striking out on the king side because all of his counterplay on the queen side is totally blocked. I mean, that's amazing. The whole point of the Benko is to put so much pressure on the queen side and playing the queen side, but Magnus completely blocked that with his a4 move, b3, and knight b5 move. That setup on the queen side just completely put a halt to Black's plan. So now Black is striking out on the king side and on the center. Magnus takes, e takes f, g takes f, rook e1 to solidify the pawn on d5 because it was being hit by the knight. Knight f6 puts more pressure on that pawn. And then Magnus decides to trade queens right here. Knight e4. Now knight h4 hits the f pawn because Black is going to win the e pawn at some point here. So Magnus is going for the f pawn. c4 is hitting the b pawn and trying to loosen up the queen side over there because Magnus has that queen side on lock. B takes c, knight takes. Now we have a little combination here. Magnus is hitting the rook, but then Bologan, he's going for the fork on c3. Knight takes rook, knight takes rook, knight c7. And then you have knight c3. Now, Bologan could have played rook b1 right here because it looks like Magnus has played a mistake because his bishop is being hit here with rook b1, right? And his rook is pinned. So it looks like he's going to lose material here, but it's actually a deep calculation that is meaning to it's for a one endgame. Magnus looked deeply and he saw that, well, if he sacks his bishop here, he's going to have a one endgame because of his a pawn. So let me just go a little bit into the variation of what Magnus could have been thinking about or could have saw. First, he would play knight takes f, and it also hits the e pawn as well, right? So he would have to defend the e pawn. Plays knight d4, attacking the knight there. He's going to lose the bishop there on c1. Knight d5. Now the thing is that now his pawn is going to run. His pawn is going to run. So the thing is, he gave up the bishop But there's nothing that can really stop his A pawn at this point. The knight on A2 is going to get taken if it goes to B4 or C3. So, and then he's got pieces that can cover it. He's got two knights hitting the E7 pawn. So it's like he saw that if Black took his bishop, he was either going to win a one endgame due to the A pawn, or he was going to get a lot of Black's material trying to stop the A pawn. So that was a deep calculation that, and Bologan, he saw that as well. I have to give him credit. He saw that as well. So instead of playing Rook B1, he played Knight C3 instead. Knight B5. They swap off a pair of knights. Bologan hits the pawn here because the pawn is a runaway pawn at this point. Especially now it has the rook behind it. The rooks go behind past pawns. Aaron Nimzo told us that. Bishop D4. B6. Pawn is running. Knight B7 blocks the pawn. So now, if you look at the position, all of Black's pieces are really destined to stop this runaway B pawn. So it's not very active for Black. Even though he has three pieces in the open board, they're all really have the intentions of stopping this past B pawn. Magnus plays Rook B4 hitting the bishop and also preparing to deliver the rook on a more active rank. Because you still have to remember, look how exposed Black's king is. And then Bologan plays bishop takes F2 here, right? Because the White's bishop is undefended. So he wins a pawn here, but he actually is losing because that was actually not a great move. That was actually a blunder. And Magnus didn't even see it. Magnus played king takes F, which is actually still winning. He goes on to win in a few short moves, but he could have won almost immediately if he would have played knight takes F here. Because, again, Black's king is so exposed, the rook is on the fourth rank here thanks to that rook lift. Play would have continued something like rook takes knight, rook g4 check. And if the king goes to f8, then you have bishop h6, king e8, rook g8 checkmate. And if the king went to h8, then you have bishop b2. And then Black would have to just give up massive material by playing rook e5, bishop takes rook check. After the king moves, then pawn takes bishop, but then the king gets to take the dark square bishop. So then it's a rook against the knight. That's over. So really, this position was almost won right on the spot if Magnus would have took with the knight, knight f5 instead of playing what he played in the game, which was king f2. But like I said, this is still winning too, though. Rook c2 check. King moves up. Black grabs that bishop there. But the game here is too far gone at this point. Knight takes f with the same ideas that I had just mentioned. Rook f1. King g4. White is threatening to take on e7. And then right here, Bologan played knight c5, which was a blunder because now Magnus can push the pawn to b7 and there's nothing that can stop the pawn. So he resigned right here. The only way to stop the pawn is to actually just sack the knight for it. And just to play out the position a little bit more, even though black resigned here, it could have went something like knight takes pawn, rook takes, and then now you have rook b8 come in. I mean, it's just going to be too much firepower here. You still have well, Magnus is up a whole knight here, so that's too much firepower. He could have played h5 here instead of if he wanted to continue on instead of resigning. He could have played h5. King takes h, rook takes, king g4, and then again you're left with just the double threat of now his rook is under attack by the king, and he still has to protect the pawn or try to defend the pawn promoting, and he can't do that as well. He would probably have to sack his knight for the pawn again. I mean, it's just too much. So he resigned a few moves earlier when Magnus played b7. So anyway, this was one of my favorite games by Magnus Carlsen. Like I said, I love how he handled the Benko Gambit. After this game here, the Benko was not that intimidating for me any longer because I felt like I have a system now of how to handle the pressure on the queen side. So if any of you guys out there struggle with playing against the Benko Gambit, or if you just want to try a new line out, try some of the ideas that Magnus employed in this game here with the pawn on a4 and the pawn on b3 and his knight on b5. That was just awesome. It stopped all the counterplay that black was trying to dish out. So, all right. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you guys next time.